Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Protecting Your Cloud Office Inbox, sponsored by Armorblox. My name is Carol, author of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Anand Raghavan, Armorblox co-founder and chief product officer, and Matt Bromley, SANS analyst. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carol. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. It's great to have you here with us today. Today, we're going to be spending some time talking about protections to cloud office inbox or email protection specifically. And I think this is something that I find to be a very, very critical must-have thing, must-have thing for organizations and security teams to have in place for a few different reasons. Number one, and it's funny, we're actually working on our SANS Protects paper for this as well. Email is by far the most prevalent form of communication, I'd say, amongst organizations out there today. Number one. Number two, I'd also argue that due to its prevalence in organizations and businesses and amongst users, it is also one of, if not the top entry vector for adversaries to try and find their way into a network. It is one of the most preferred methods, one of the most successful methods. It is one of the things that businesses lean on just as much as attackers lean on to find a way into an environment, to conduct business, to transfer files, to send data back and forth. And when you have a medium or a conduit that is this heavily used, it is going to be a very, very preferred vector to be used by adversaries as well. Now, there's a couple of additional complications there when it comes to protecting email. Number one is just sheer volume. There is, billions and billions of emails sent every single day. Admittedly, a large amount of it is spam. I think I read a recent report that said something around 60 to 65% of all daily email traffic was spam. But that 35% that, we really rely on, or I should say that 35 to 40% that we really rely on, that is a really, really crucial part of business, but it's also the tunnel through which adversaries decide to try and slip their content through. And because of this, because we're still talking about tens or hundreds of emails every single day, it ends up being a very successful route for them. So therefore, it's a huge benefit for organizations to embrace email security. And that's exactly what Armorblox brings to us today. And that's what we're going to be looking at. And I'm excited to be joined by Anand as well, who's going to be coming on camera a little bit later on in the presentation as he walks through Armorblox and their offering, what they bring to the table as a platform. But we had a chance to get hands-on first, and I'll be walking you through what that looks like. Now, before I get too far down there, my agenda is pretty easy today. I want to show you what it's like to get hands-on with the platform. I want to show you what our product review experience was like, some of the things that we saw, some of the really, really big takeaways, and really where I think this is a great product to implement in front of your cloud inbox, primarily because adversaries have all sorts of new TTPs these days, all sorts of tips, tactics, techniques, tools, procedures, things that they're doing, all sorts of methods up their sleeve. Really, really interesting approaches I've seen adversaries take. And I like the fact that Armorblox sits in front of that and actually offers a really, really robust level of detection as well. But before I do that, I have to identify what I'm calling a little bit of our problem statement, if you will. Now, I did kind of go through this in my introduction as well, talking about how important or how critical email is when it comes to being a medium for businesses, but also a medium for adversaries as well. There's a survey quote I was looking for. We read a 2021 survey from Ivanti that found over a 12-month period, 74% of the organizations that they had polled or that they had interviewed or they had done work with fell victim to a phishing period within that 12-month, within that year-long period. Folks, 74% of organizations. Here's the thing that I need security teams to remember. Here's the thing that I need folks to be aware of when we talk about numbers like 74%. That is an adversary success rate. And a lot of you who may have seen my webcast before, some of the things I like to talk about and harp on are bringing down adversary success rates. I look at security. I look at the functionality of cybersecurity products, platforms, approaches, tools, whatever it may be, as a way to lessen that success rate, to get it down as far as to zero or as close to zero as possible. So in that aspect, we have to start at what that successful rate looks like. And when I see something like 74% of a success rate, 74% of victims or of organizations falling victim to phishing attacks, that's a huge mountain that we've got to climb. That's a huge position we've got to get over because that success rate is just so high. We're not talking about a one-off technique that might work for 1% of organizations around the world. We're talking about a significant majority holding tactic that gets used by adversaries out there. So we've got to make strides. We've got to make the investments to bring these down. But then, of course, that brought me to like another realization, which is we invest in these defenses, but do they actually work? Are the things that we're using actually benefiting us? Are they benefiting our organizations? Because for me to sit up here and talk about email defenses, this isn't a new concept for most organizations out there. In fact, I'd argue anyone with a cloud inbox out there has probably got, or they think they've got some level of protection in there. But then I have to ask the question of, well, if we've already got things in place, are we seeing that adversary success rate go down? And when it comes to email-based attacks, the answer is unfortunately no. So I pulled one of my favorite stats in the world from one of my least favorite, but very closely followed attacks out there. We took a look at the FBI's 2021 IC3 report, in which they found business email compromise, the old tried and true classic BEC or executive account compromise EAC attacks, as the top overall attack vector, with losses in 2020 at $2.4 billion. Folks, this is a $43 billion fraud industry that has taken place over the course of just 5 years, according to that report. 43 billion potential or exposed losses over that time. And the primary attack vector, the primary communication vector, and in fact, sometimes the entire attack landscape is done inside of email. And this has been going up year after year after year after year. So I have to pause and ask the question, are we making a dent in adversary success rates? And there's a chance that we are. There's a very strong chance that if I were to look at a different type of attack, perhaps, delivering malware via email, attaching executables or malicious PDFs or malicious documents or macro-laden documents or anything like that, maybe those attached to an email, maybe that percentage rate's gone down. But some of the really core email attacks, the ones that really, really can bring an organization to their knees, is unfortunately seeing a growth in success rates. And let me quantify that statement a little bit really quick. When I talk about an attack that can bring an organizations to its knees, yes, I understand that I could deliver ransomware via an email and that could stop or halt an organization. I could also deliver a reverse shell or a piece of callback malware or some other sort of nuisance thing via email. And that may also cause an organization some damage. But when I conduct a fraudulent attack that removes millions of dollars from the bank account and they never see any hope of getting that money back, I have taken away payroll capabilities. I've taken away functioning, the ability to purchase things. I've taken away the ability to purchase the support to recover from an attack. So when I stand here and I stress just how critical it is that we bring down the success rates in some of these attacks, that's because these attacks are very, very damaging at the upsend. So for that reason, we took a look at Armorblox, a company focused on minimizing these particular threats. And when we first met with the Armorblox team, they presented to us a unique, novel way that they're going about solving this particular problem. And they're doing that through a combination of natural language understanding, or NLU, combined with machine learning, AI, and all the other sorts of automated technologies that we've seen grow in popularity and capability over the past few years. And they use this in combination to detect and block emails. And not only that, but they've also applied that exact same logic and capability to protecting sensitive data from leaving the environment. There's a really cool DLP functionality inside of there as well. So we're going to go hands-on with this. We had a chance to get hands-on with an instance of Armorblox. We got to see some live attacks take place. We got to see some malicious emails get stopped, and we got to look at what that security workflow looks like. And I'm happy to share that with you here today. And that's what we're going to get into. So the first thing is, For those of you who have seen me talk about this thing before, the first part of any platform, any tool that I like to get into is that initial dashboard. And I will always comment on what that initial dashboard looks like, because this is the place where we start. My analysis starts here. My security investigations start here. If I'm a manager or a C-suite or a stakeholder or someone higher up that ladder, I'm going to go here first to get insight into what's going on inside the organization. And I'm a huge fan of really succinct, to the point, intuitive, what's going on dashboards. And Armorblox delivers on that 100%. We've got some really cool statistics about threats that have been stopped over time. You might notice that there's a really good breakdown of threats versus abuse versus DLP. I can see the number of threats. I can see the region that they're, the segment of business that they're from. I can see the type of threats that are there, whether it's something like credential phishing, spear phishing. And even more importantly, and I'm looking at that middle donut ring there in the middle here, the one that has the 978 in the middle, I can also get insight into where these threats have been detected from. And I like this because if I'm a security person and I want to know where should I be focusing my efforts on from a detection or a analysis or perhaps even a tuning perspective, well, I want to know who's my noisiest platform. A little bit of a giveaway because we are talking about email security and we are talking about protecting your cloud inbox. Obviously, email is going to be one of our heavy top talkers. That's what we'd expect to see in this case. But you may take a look and notice I've also got alerts in there from Slack and Box. And I like the fact that we're extending ourselves to a few other mediums of communication or file storage. It gives me a chance to really wrap some interesting analytics and a unified approach into security. Now, scrolling down in that exact same dashboard, we do get more insight. I can see really some really cool kind of details that I didn't really expect to find in a dashboard. I didn't expect to find being useful. But actually, it turns out they really are. I like the viewpoint that gets given here. So the top two blocks talk about the most attacked VIPs and the most attacked persons. And I think that's a very interesting distinction that Armorblox calls out at the beginning that I think security teams should be aware of as well. So when we talk about most attacked VIPs, that's a pretty critical statement because it is likely that those VIPs are going to have different capabilities inside of the organization. They might be able to issue purchasing commands with a simple one-line email or a simple spoken word. They're in charge of money. They're in charge of hiring. They're in charge of people. They're usually the last stop for sensitive data. The head of HR has a very, very much different range of permissions than someone who's interning in HR, or at least they should, I would hope. So I like the fact that the platform says, hey, we're able to define and determine who our VIPs are, and we're able to look at threats directed towards them. We're able to look at who gets attacked the most. I like this because not only does it give me, a security person, those unique analytics, but it also helps me focus my education and it helps me see what's going on from a user perspective. If my entire range of VIPs sits inside of the financial related parts of the company, guess what? I have some insight into perhaps what my adversaries are going for. But then we also get the most attacked persons. And this is where I like the shift from VIP to persons, because it's one thing to know one of my VIPs has got a ridiculous amount of email coming through or a ridiculous amount of attacks focused at them. It's something else to compare those numbers to the rest of the organization. Perhaps my CFO is one of my top attacked VIPs, but perhaps the numbers compared to someone else in the organization are really causing me issues or really causing me grief. Perhaps looking at something such as, well, my CFO has gotten 50 to 60 attack emails, but I've got 100 coming after someone else inside of accounts payable. And that's actually what we're looking at here. Someone inside of accounts payable has got 71 incidents versus my CFO's 69 incidents. Now, those are not too far off of a number range, but it definitely makes me want to answer or ask the question, how come my AP, my payroll admin, my director of finance, how come my financial areas are getting targeted a lot versus perhaps what a lot of security folks may be thinking? Well, why wouldn't an adversary go after the IT administrators, the security engineers, the people who have that domain level access throughout the enterprise or that domain admin level access? Why not go after them? Why target the marketing department versus targeting the IT department? There's a lot of reasons why adversaries might go after an initial target first, or it may be what they're trying to go after. It may be their goal. Perhaps the goal is financial manipulation or something along those lines. And then perhaps one of what I'm calling my favorite parts of the platform whatsoever, and you're going to see me talk about this in just a moment. Bottom left-hand side here is our model health. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. And then, of course, we get into some other high-level statistics as well. The reason I'm spending as much time as I am on this initial dashboard, because I'm about to move on past it, but the reason I'm spending that much time here is, again, I want someone to open a platform, open a tool, and be able to look immediately and say, what do I need to care about right now? What do I need to focus on right now? Because I want the computer to be doing the detection stuff behind the scenes. I don't want to open a platform into raw data. I want to open a platform into how many threats do we have? Who's the top targeted individuals? Where do I need to focus my user education? Where do I need to focus my remediation efforts? And Armorblox brings us right there. And I love that succinct point of information. But as mentioned, there was something else that caught my eye as I was working my way through this platform as well. And not only did we have it in that bottom right portion of that previous dashboard, but I went ahead and pulled this screenshot from the abuse mailbox as well. Scattered around the various dashboards inside of the platform are efficiency statistics or honing statistics or effectiveness statistics. And this is one of my favorite things about this right here, because one of the questions that I see asked a lot among security problems or products is this thing actually working? How do we know our controls are actually working? How do we know our controls are adjusting to my environment? We have said multiple times, very, very few security products are one size fits all. In fact, I'd argue no security products, if not a very minimal number, are one size fits all. So for that reason, I want a security platform that hones and tunes itself to my environment. Now, I have sat here before and told multiple security operations folks and detection engineers, you need to make sure you customize your rules to fit your environment, because your niche things, be it traffic, be it hosts, be it users, be it uptime, downtime, whatever it may be, those are going to be unique to you. I think Armorblox skipped a step there, which is good. They leapfrogged over the analyst responsibility and said, we're going to make the platform hone and tune itself. Not only that, we're going to provide the efficiency statistics back to our users. So I saw these things scattered around, and I was really excited to see the platform continually testing itself and continually revealing what its statistics look like as well. So we had a 3x matching efficiency and a 4x on auto remediation efficiency. I get insight into what has automatically been done, what has manually been done, how many emails have been reported. Now, to a lot of folks, this may look like, these are just some high-level statistics, Matt. What's so exciting about these? The fact is they are a product of the platform continually honing and developing its own efficiency inside of here. The thing I like about this is it doesn't give me any question. I'm not sitting there wondering to myself, well, is this thing actually working? I'm not necessarily needing to fire off a whole bunch of tests in the background and hope that they all get caught. Instead, I can look directly at the platform's effectiveness and understand, where are we in that maturity process? Is Armorblox growing with me, growing with my security team, or not? And I really like being able to answer that question in just one spot. So with that said, I'll jump into really kind of one of the other ways that you can customize this environment, to customize the platform to fit your own environment. And this may seem like a weird place to start, but I actually found myself jumping into the policies really quickly while I'm looking at statistics about efficiency and matching capabilities. I was excited to also see that there are ways that I can customize the platform to my organization's needs. There is the ability, if we want to come in here, to customize, first off, custom policies that allow us to determine certain, if you think about those VIP names from earlier on, we can drop in certain vendor information, payroll details, medical record information, project code names, and things like that. Not only that, we can also create policies in what actions need to be taken place against emails if they're detected. I find it funny because I usually tell organizations inbox rules are something that should be monitored by the security team. It's a pretty common attacker technique to modify inbox rules. However, from a security perspective, I like the idea of rules that I can issue against malicious traffic or malicious emails that come in. So in this case right here, interestingly enough, we've got a policy in place for credential phishing. And I like this because I'm able to separate based on security incident type. I can do certain things with my emails. So for example, a credential phish that comes in, this is a policy that identifies emails in which someone's trying to, again, masquerade as a reputable entity to steal sensitive information. I can take all those inbound emails, I can delete them, I can apply quarantine details, I can forward them to somewhere else, I can send an alert to someone, I can take care of the entire notification process on my own. And you may think to yourself, well, why on earth would I want to flood someone's mailbox with all these details, with all this information? Because I want to also use this to understand my attack surface. Maybe I'll push all these emails to an automated inbox, which can pull down and pull statistics out and give me an idea just how often are we being, oh, wait, I don't need to do all that. Armorblox already pulls all those details for me. That's the other nice thing I like about this is I'm not needing to go through and generate all my own aggregate details. Not only can I push emails or delete or have certain policies that actuate against them, the platform is going to continue to keep those stats on the back end for me as well. And I've worked with plenty of vendors who look at an email and say, oh, it was quarantine, we don't really need to worry about it. That may be useful information for you, but I need to know how often we're running into quarantines. Who are my top attacked users, my top attacked VIPs? Who are the people who are really, really, really under attack or who are really big targets? And then I think to myself, wait, I can just go back to that initial dashboard and it's all prompted right there for me. So I like how things get cyclical really, really quickly inside of this platform because the questions that I want to answer based on emails that trip policies are actually already answered in the beginning for me. So we're now going to break down two high-level categories that we have emails fall into from an Armorblox perspective. The first is threats. The second is going to be DLP. Now, if you remember in the very beginning, I did say that with all of this email visibility, not only does Armorblox set up some really interesting protection, detection, prevention capabilities, but it also uses its vantage point to say, you know what, we can really easily implement some DLP methodologies in here as well. So I don't need to not only can I defend against credential phishing, but I can also watch for certain data types leaving the environment as well. But we'll start with threats. And the threats interface, which is really a subpart of that initial dashboard. This is a really, really nice, rich interface for digging through emails, allows me to really speed through investigations pretty quickly. So I've pulled up an example of this here for you. This is an example of a credential phishing email that was detected by the platform. Now, there's a few notes here. Everything I show you is done inside of the platform. I cannot tell you all the number of times I've looked at an email threat and I've looked at metadata for an email threat, but I've never looked at the actual email itself. In fact, the number of times I've had to go to an email server, download the offending email, and pull the headers out of that content, as opposed to just the detection itself, has been way too high. And I like that Armorblox will kind of, again, leapfrog me for that and brought me right to the analysis place that I want to be in. This is an incident. This is a credential phishing incident that was detected by the platform. It is someone looking for some box credentials, but take a look at the way that this thing gets broken down. So first off, the email itself is captured inside of the platform. I love this from an analysis perspective because I don't need to go jump and dig through my cloud provider's email system or try to issue some API calls that are undocumented in order to pull some of these things back. Instead, I get the email presented right inside the dashboard. You might notice over to the right-hand side, there's also an ability to view the headers of the email in case I wanted to dig a little bit further into some of these details. Number one. Number two, I can also see what flagged inside of the incident or what flagged inside of this particular email. So in this case right here, we can see that we've got a couple of things that the platform called as suspicious or one to bring to our attention. The first one is the urgency that's present inside of the email. The second is the fact that there's a bad URL inside of it. Folks, if you remember in the very beginning, I told you Armorblox brought NLU, natural language understanding, to the table. That's exactly what we're looking at right here. I didn't bring it up again until we got here because this is what email detections should look like. A lot of email solutions out there, or a lot of email security solutions out there, work like this. They're going to take that email, they're going to see that link inside of the email, double check to see whether or not that link is good or bad, and report back to the user and either flag it as spam, classify it as a phish, or pass it through to the user. For a lot of folks, this creates, unfortunately, a false sense of security. I've seen far too many incidents kick off where someone says, oh, you got spearfished. And they say, no, I didn't click on any malicious emails because my security team let it through. there's this assumption that if the email gets through, therefore it's good. And this falls back. Y'all remember when we started, not we, but do you remember when folks started thinking if I saw that green padlock in the top of my browser bar, that site was safe because it was encrypted? Remember when those assumptions were being made? We see a lot of the same assumptions in email. So that creates a false sense of security of, well, this thing looks legitimate. So what did we do to get around that? Anyone know? We started adding things like brackets with external in the subject lines. We started dropping huge notifications inside of our emails that say, this has originated outside of your organization. We're trying to do everything we can to scream to the user, this is not from inside of our company. This is not from us. Well, I mean, this is an email allegedly from box.com telling me to change my password. Of course it's external. Of course it didn't come from internal. No one, we don't, unless you work at Box, no one internally is telling me to change my password. So all of those bypasses or all of those security concerns, they go away because I expect this email to be external. So we needed to go a step further in detecting maliciousness. And that's where Armorblox rolls in with their NLU, that natural language understanding. Why don't we look at the conversation inside of the email and use that to determine if there's any more malicious points I can tack on to this assessment? And let me give you all kind of an example of what that looks like. Not a visual, a visual one, but I'll give you a verbal one. I know when I've logged into, let's say, Google from a new device or a new account, I get an email alert to my kind of central or backup email that says, hey, we've detected this login. If this is not you, please change your password or notify us and lock your account. It's very kind of, it might be you, but it might not be you, but we're letting you know. It's very informational. A spearfishing or a credential phishing email kind of goes another route. It says things like, hey, there's a security incident. You need to change this now. You need to do this immediately. Hackers can compromise you. There's a lot of urgency baked into that email that is meant to scare the user and is meant to make the user think that something wrong is happening. The other emails that you get, they may have a little bit of a sense of urgency, but they're not pushing the user necessarily. They are informing with heightened state of awareness. And I'm going to draw the line between those two because there's a different way those conversations are written. And you can see that in here. We can see that Armorblox is looking at that sentence. They're looking at the way the sentence is constructed. They're looking for words of urgency. They're looking for words that say, do this now, focus on a thing. We're going to see this in our case study in just a moment as well. But I like these little clues that give me and my analysts some additional points of thought as to whether or not this is a good or bad email. And I really like this. Now, something else inside of here, which I find to be pretty interesting, this is scrolling down. So if I go back really quick, you'll see, take a look at the top bar where it says email analysis, matching emails, people, and sender. If we scroll further down in this investigation, we can see some additional details that were detected during this as well. We can see that there was a malicious link detected in here. Armorblox already went ahead and did the redirect for us. It also does some analytics of heuristics, such as how many times has there been communication back and forth between these parties? Have these two parties emailed each other ever? These are the types of things that as an analyst, I want to know. If I've got to make a decision about whether or not email is good or bad, whether or not an executive should or should not click on something, it could take me hours to pull all these metadata points down. I don't really have the ability to hop into someone else's inbox and ask their email provider, whether it's O365 or Google Mail or Gmail or whatever it is. I don't have a way to ask the question, hey, how many times has so-and-so emailed you? The reason I can't ask that is because what if they deleted their emails? Now, the user may come back and say, I've never heard of this person before in my life. Well, I've seen that be legitimate as well. But I like the fact that the platform keeps track of that communication history. It's able to dig into those email headers and see that true sender detail and able to line all that up and give my analyst a quick snapshot of how often have these users discussed. Now, I want to note that from an email authentication perspective, again, all of our, kind of technological checks work out. DMARC's in place, SPF is in place, everything's aligned. We've got a pass across the board there. So actually, technologically, this email checks out from a security perspective. I'd say it's more of a validated / authorized perspective, but we want to make sure we get that initial detail into email content. and able to drill down what's truly malicious and what's not. The other thing, and I apologize, my screenshots are a little bit out of order here, but if you take a look at the right-hand side, you'll see there's a snapshot button there as well. If I go back a slide, this snapshot, this login screen that you're seeing here, this is actually the snapshot presented in that particular alert. That's probably one of my other favorite features about this whole thing, is not only does Armorblox recognize and say, hey, this is a bad URL, you need to be aware of it, but it also goes out and snapshots that URL for me. So my analyst, A, don't have to do it, and B, they can see exactly what's in that screenshot. What are the things that they need to focus on? What are the things that are presented on that page? What does that user see? What does that look like? And I'll be honest with you all, that looks a lot like a Microsoft login screen. I could see how that could easily trip up a user or two. That was threats. The other side of the platform, or at least I'll say the other significant data thing, the other significant data protection that I see is in form of DLP. There's an integrated DLP functionality that, again, uses that email visibility and helps protect from secure data leaving the organization. And I was a huge fan of seeing this in place as well, primarily because, as always, I am a huge proponent of, if you've already got the visibility there, then use that to your advantage. Use that to the best of your capability, and take a look at the different types of policies that can get enacted and then get used for our DLP. So we've got things like PCI, PII, vendor numbers, CEO Gmail. This is where we continue to hone and refine the platform to an organization's capabilities. Right up front, I'm seeing what users are being impacted, dates, remediation statuses, so on and so forth. Here's a zoomed in example of one of those DLP emails that were caught. This is one that had a product launch code name wrapped inside of it. Now, of course, we may be looking and saying, well, it's got the word latest code name in it. It's pretty straightforward what they're doing there. That's not what tripped. What actually tripped was that manually inserted keyword of Sandpiper. Sandpiper was that key product code name. And I like the organization's ability to reach into the platform and drop in, sprinkle certain keywords that should not necessarily be discussion points inside of email, or should not be externally leaving the environment as well. I'm a huge fan of, again, being able to put as much protection around data as possible. And I like seeing it here from an email DLP perspective. So my last little final review, or my last little final piece as we walk through this platform here, is going to be done in the form of a case study. I took a look at another investigation here. This one was a VIP impersonation threat. And I wanted to really focus on, what does this mean? What does it mean when I say VIP impersonation? It's pretty straightforward. This is someone trying to enumerate or trying to masquerade as that VIP to direct someone to do something, most of the times illegal, or not necessarily illegal, but criminal, if you will. For example, asking someone to purchase gift cards to pay back an amount of money, asking someone to go and transfer money to an external account that has never been done before. The key point about all this is not a malware-laden threat. This is not ransomware. This is not some sort of information security threat that is full of someone just stomping all over the environment. Instead, this is actually a very conversational threat. This is a back and forth between 2 parties, 3 parties, 4 parties, however it may be. But this is a back and forth of a conversation being had. And take a look. I'm going to actually head to the next slide really quick. This is the beginning of that email. So I'm scrolling down in the conversation here from this page to this page. I'm scrolling down, and I can trace the entire thread history inside of the platform. And I can see that while I had a lot of alerts on the previous side, this is actually where our conversation started. I've got an email allegedly sent from the CEO to Barty, someone else in the organization, saying, hey, I'm in a customer meeting. I need you to take care of something urgently for me. Now, I'll be very honest with you. Someone reaching out and saying, I'm in a meeting, I need help urgently, that's not that irregular. But let's trace the conversation a little bit further. Barty responds and says, sure, well, let me know what you need. And take a look at all of these flags in this conversation. I need you to go to a store. I need you to buy gift cards. I need. Don't worry, I got your back. You got to do it immediately. I'm giving you a deadline. There's all sorts of really weird language things wrapped inside of here. Now, a good adversary will try and find a very obedient target, a very obedient victim who will say, well, I really don't want to upset the CEO. So if the CEO tells me to go to Safeway and buy $2,000 worth of gift cards, I'm going to have to do that for them. And I've got 2 hours to do it. What the adversary is really doing is they're trying to create a situation where someone falls victim, they get something done quickly, the money is gone, and there's no way of getting it back. Because when the CEO actually hears about this incident, or Barty goes and requests a reimbursement for that gift card purchase, and the company says, we have no idea what you're talking about, the adversary is gone. The money is gone out of the environment too. But I like the fact that the platform is able to pick up on and detect this very conversational back and forth threat. Because again, this is not something that we can throw an MD5 hash against. There's really very few IOCs out here. But what the platform's doing is it's answering the questions that analysts should be asking. So if this email conversation came through and someone said, hey, is this legitimate or not? What types of questions would I ask? I would take a look at the language. I would take a look at the request. How many times has the CEO asked Barty to do this? Is this the first time they've done this or the 100th time they've done this? I'll share a quick anecdote here before we move on and I hand it over to Armorblox side. And one quick anecdote I'll say is I once stood up in a conference presentation. I said to folks, no CEO will ever reach out and request that you transfer millions of dollars immediately because they're super busy. And I had a CEO come up to me who said, yes, actually, we will. He was a CEO. He did a lot of business in various meetings around the globe. And it was not irregular for him to pick up his phone and tell his secretary or tell his staff, hey, I need you to wire this to this place. And he's like, it was a very legitimate way of doing business. Very ad hoc, I feel like it felt like, but they had an authorization mechanism in place. They had a way to validate who was who. There was a triple check system in there. There was all sorts of things. So his comment to me was, when I pick up the phone and I request with urgency a transfer take place, he's like, I kick off a process. That is not the entire process. Adversaries try to find a way to make that the entire process. And that right there is one of the key differences in email detection. If I'm going to examine a conversation, look for threats that are out there, and I'm going to use advanced technology to do so, I don't want to look at this retroactively. I don't want to watch an attack take place. I want to catch that conversation as it's happening. I want to catch that threat as that email exchange is taking place. And those are some of the really, really cool takeaways we found from an Armorblox perspective, was being able to examine the conversation of the threat, examine the key details, examine some of the key pieces of it, and then make a decision, make a determination from there to say, is this good? Is this bad? What's the next step for us? So with that said, I now get to hand over for the rest of the webcast. I'll be peppering in every now and then, but I'm going to hand it over to Anand over from Armorblox to tell us a little bit about how the company came together and, really talk to us some more about kind of that, why organizations should really, be focused on Armorblox and be focused on continuing to defend their email. Anand, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks a lot for that comprehensive review of the product. On the Armorblox side, we are really excited to build features that customers want. So some of the things that you're seeing there were built directly with feedback from our customers. Just some quick background on who we are at Armorblox. So this is who Armorblox is. So today, we work with about 58,000 organizations, big and small. A lot of them are organizations with less than 50 employees. We connect over APIs into organizations' email environments. And that includes not just cloud providers like Office 365 and Google Workspace. We can also connect to on-premise Exchange deployments. It takes about 5 minutes to set up the cloud deployment, so very easy to configure. Does not require any DNS or MX record changes, very straightforward to deploy and manage. And instantly you see a couple of values coming in. One is just the user-reported threats. Based on studies that we have done with our customers, we see anywhere from 60 to 85% reduction in user-reported email threats because we're able to catch a lot wider category of attacks that come in. And the second one is reduction in phishing response times. So even when things are missed and people report those emails, Armorblox can instantly go analyze those and remediate those for the security analyst teams. So the mean time to remediation for these shrinks drastically. The product, the way the intelligence engine in the product works, and the reason we're able to do that in these 3 SKUs. So we have the inbound email protection. We spoke a lot about all the different targeted attacks and account takeover protection. We also have abuse mailbox remediation. That's what I just mentioned, where when a user reports a phishing email, we can go and automatically remediate those. We also have a fully functioning outbound DLP product that Matt spoke about, and I'll go into it a little bit more detail as well. And why are some of these attacks slipping through? What are the reasons why the current set of techniques are proving to be insufficient? And the primary reason, as Matt pointed out, is that the attacks are moving away from the traditional mass campaigns where I have this link, that's a bad link, and I'm sending it to 10,000 people to see who clicks and then try to compromise the credentials. Attackers are getting a lot more targeted. And here are some examples of targeted attacks where organizations are finding it challenging to use legacy solutions to protect themselves against. VIP impersonation. So I can put in a lot of rules to put all combinations of the first name and last name of my CEO or of my C-suite to try and prevent any impersonation emails coming in. Attackers always find a way around that when you have static rules. That's one challenge. Payroll fraud is another very popular category for attackers. It looks like an employee is requesting somebody in the payroll department to move the direct deposit to a different bank account number. Now, the challenge in a lot of these attacks is that these are what we call sensitive business workflows. During a normal course of operation of a business, the person that is receiving the email is accustomed to receiving these as part of conducting their business. So an employee asking for a payroll check to be sent to a new bank account number does happen. So somebody in the payroll team is not alarmed when they see an email like that. And that's why they are so insidious. Another category, which is very, very difficult to detect, is a vendor fraud. So my organization might be really well protected with all the security solutions that I have, but I have a large ecosystem of suppliers, vendors, distributors, and let's say they are not as protected as I am, which is typically the case if I'm a bigger organization. I am as vulnerable as they are. If the vendor's account is compromised and I got a fake invoice from that account, or I got a credential phishing link from that account, which is a zero-day attack, most traditional solutions are not able to do anything about that because they just don't have visibility into the vendor's operations. Credential phishing is another big category where it's moving away from just bad domains that have been there and stale for a while, which are really good for traditional secure email gateways and email providers to catch, to more of a zero-day attack scenario where it is a new domain that's been stood up and usually takes 48 hours to 7 days for most threat feeds to actually know that this is a bad domain. So those have risen in popularity as well as a new technique for attackers to utilize. And then, of course, the last category, especially for the large dollar value kind of scams, the account takeover attempt. So the attacker has compromised a user's account and they just squat on that account and they do a few different things. They log in once in a while from a new location to look at the emails to see if there's any financial conversations happening. Or they might set a mail forwarding rule to say all emails that come into this account need to get forwarded to a Gmail ID or something like that so they can observe the conversations from there. Now, these are very difficult to detect using legacy techniques. And these are the new crop of attacks that are causing all the statistics that you see in the Verizon data breach report or the FBI IC3 report that Matt spoke about, where predominantly the number one threat vector today in the enterprise is threats that happen over email. The number one cyber insurance claim, according to a study from AIG 2 years ago, was business email compromise. Was not ransomware, was not anything else. It was business email compromise. That's the challenge in the market.
And while you're going through it, would you mind telling everyone a little bit about the technology? I know I hit on some of it, I think, from an NLU perspective and some of the ML that you guys are doing, but would you mind expanding a little bit further on how you actually go through and detect and stop these types of attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, that ties in really well with a question from Caleb on the chat as well. So there's a few things we do interestingly. One is when we connect over APIs, we look at 6 months of email archives and we start building models. What you see on the left in the screen here. So in addition to looking at all the headers, looking at all the metadata around extended headers and all of that, we build models around 3 specific buckets of things. The first bucket is around user identities. So people's names, titles, departments, Active Directory groups they're part of, all of that goes into that bucket. Similarly, we also build models for identities of vendors. Which are the vendors that interact with this organization? What shadow IT applications are there in this environment that have sent out password confirmation emails or password reset emails or sign up emails inside of people's mailboxes. So that goes into the identity bucket. Second is the behavior bucket. So what domains do these users communicate with? How often do they communicate? What is the nature of those domains in terms of reputation and things like that? Is it a symmetric communication? Is it a marketing person sending someone a lot of emails? Or is there a lot of symmetric conversation happening with that external party? So that's the behavior bucket. And the third and the most important bucket is the language in the emails. And here is where, to Caleb's question in the chat, we are very different from some of the names you mentioned there. We go deep into the language to understand what is being discussed. So you saw some screenshots earlier on from Matt where we highlight things that are to do with request, to do with financial terms, things like that. Those are not just being highlighted in the UI after the detection is done. Those are an integral part of how our detection is done. And the language engine is predominantly trying to do one thing. Is the language in the email telling us that this is a sensitive business workflow? Which means, is somebody asking for money? Is somebody asking for sensitive data? Is somebody asking for confidential data? Is somebody asking for credentials? That's what we look for in a sensitive business workflow. And that's what gets to the root of it. We get to the root of that with the language models. Now with these, in our detection techniques bucket, which is the next set of things you see there, now every product out there today talks machine learning. If you look at our marketing on all the vendors' websites, I feel a lot of sympathy for security teams because they all sound similar. But when we say machine learning, we mean at least 4 different kinds of algorithms. The first one is around traditional statistical techniques. For example, if something is spam or not is what is called a bimodal classifier, which is a traditional machine learning approach, right? So we have multimodal classifiers which take an email and put it into 4 different buckets or 5 different buckets. Second is statistical techniques. Like, for example, is Manu logging in from a new IP address today compared to where he typically logs in from? Now that can be done using clustering kind of techniques, which is a traditional statistical technique. Then you have deep learning techniques, where you're trying to identify using deep learning models, using neural networks, is there a financial term in a paragraph? Is there a request in a sentence? Is there an urgency sentiment? That goes into the deep learning side of it. Also, those of you that follow some of the pre-trained model literature, GPT-1, 2, 3, we have a lot of pre-trained models that actually go and identify fraudulent emails, like the example that Matt showed. Hey, are you at your desk? I need you to do something for me urgently. Those are deep learning models. The last bucket is a natural language understanding bucket. And there, what we specifically look for are language-based cues. Let's take a simple example. So if you join a Zoom meeting, you get a 9-digit number, which is a Zoom meeting ID. Now, is that a Zoom meeting ID or is that a social security number? Just looking for a 9-digit token doesn't solve for that. You got to look at the sentence structure around it. You got to look at the paragraph, break it down to understand what is this 9-digit number referring to. And that's where the natural language techniques come in to identify things called semantic role labeling and other techniques where we go into that.
And I'm wondering, could you help us? So I as I walked through this, and I ran into the same thing with the platform as well. As I was walking through this, I really liked seeing a lot of this in action. I think you bring up a good point, which is, we see a lot of these buzzwords kind of thrown around everywhere, but we very rarely get to see them in action and things like that. So, you talked a little bit earlier about BEC. We've talked about some different types of attacks and the ways that you go through. Do you have any examples or anything of the types of threats we should prioritize or look for? Probably very similar to the case study I had, but I'd love to get your take on a certain incident and kind of walking through it and what it looks like from an analysis perspective as well. Oh, perfect. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Yeah. This is an example of a particular payroll fraud that we spoke about slightly earlier. What you see in the email on the left-hand side is the email highlighted in the dashboard that Matt showed you, where we tried to explain to the analyst why we flagged an email as suspicious, right? So you can see all the different highlights, the financial terms we saw in the email, the request that was made, the urgency in getting this done by the next pay date. So all of those are things that the security analyst can look at to understand that these are the reasons why the language looks suspicious to Armorblox. The other thing I wanted to point out there is the banner that you see at the top, right? So we spoke earlier, Matt mentioned about the reason why the external tags are not very effective, because if I'm someone that receives 80% of my email from outside the organization, my brain is tuned to just ignore that external tag. I'm not paying attention. Even a generic warning banner that typically email providers insert saying, hey, this email could be malicious, that also, it doesn't really tell me why, and I tend to end up not paying attention to it. We have what are called contextual warning banners. So we are specifically calling out to the end user, and that can be inserted in the email. So the end user knows that this email is an employee impersonation. This email is a payroll fraud. And that's why this has been flagged by Armorblox. So if I'm in the payroll department and I got this email, I have this big warning banner at the top, I know I need to pay attention. to this email, somebody's telling me that, hey, this is potentially an impersonation. Now I can call the employee, look at the company directory, call the employee. Another tip, don't call the number in the email. Attackers use that very often. So call the employee to make sure that this is a legitimate request.
Nice. Yeah, I like the way you walk through that. And also the context-aware banners, I think, are a pretty awesome thing to have in place as well. We had a question come in actually now, which I think is kind of interesting. So it talks about, we've talked about some pretty advanced capabilities when we, get to things like natural language understanding, machine learning, things like that. But someone came in and asked and said, hey, some of the other capabilities like URL filtering and malware detection, that kind of stuff, even though they're tried and true, they're still used by malicious actors out there. Like, so we still have spearfishes that still deliver malware and that kind of stuff. You guys aren't ignoring them? How does Armorblox kind of counteract some of those different types of threats, if you will?
Yeah. For the URL protection, that's another interesting behavioral economics analysis that we went after. So when you rewrite every URL, which is typically the status quo when it comes to legacy solutions, you are incentivizing the user to do the wrong thing. Because if every URL is rewritten, for me to know where it goes, the only way to do that is to click on the URL. So you're training me to click on everything to know where it goes, which is not what you want to do ideally. So we do what is called smart URL rewriting or dynamic URL rewriting. We only rewrite URLs where we suspect that it could potentially be going to an unsafe location. So as an end user, when I look at an email and the URL is not rewritten, I don't need to click into it because I know it's safe already. And if it is rewritten, I know that I need to pay attention because it could potentially be going to a malicious site. So that encourages the right kind of behavior. So that's the first thing. The second thing is rewriting is only as effective as your detection. And Matt, to the earlier screenshot that you showed, because we're using computer vision-based techniques for brand impersonation detection and things like that, and combining that with language signals, where we are trying to identify sensitive business workflows, like a password reset email, or, oh, your Office 365 account has reached its storage limit. Click here to increase your storage. Things like that. Because we're combining the language with the computer vision-based brand impersonation analysis, the URL rewriting now is a lot more effective, not only just at making sure that the users know that they should not click on the link, but even if they did, we can detect a lot more of those sites and put this big blocking page in front of them so they know that the site is not safe. So both the smart URL rewriting and the better detection go hand in hand to help them. And the other part to this is the malware detection and response to your question. And even on the malware side, there's a couple of approaches to do it. You could just package an open source product like a Cuckoo Sandbox, check a box and say, yep, we already provide malware sandboxing. We have a state-of-the-art solution as part of our platform that does advanced malware sandboxing, detonation, provides the hashes and all of that for the security teams to look at, both static analysis and dynamic analysis of files. So we are a fully capable platform to detect advanced malware as well and block those emails from getting into user mailboxes.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I think I was rereading that question. I think that goes through actually. So whoever asked that, good question. I like how it feels, Anand, it feels like we can quickly get ahead in some of the advanced technology, but it's good to always kind of resort back and be like, wait a second, what about the tried and true techniques, right? We never want security to get so advanced that it skips past some of the older techniques or some of the more legacy ones, if you will. Do me a favor, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about maybe some of the DLP side of things. So I did make a point to mention some of the DLP takeaways and some of the capabilities in my portion of going through this. One of the things that I know a lot of folks have done with, especially when it comes to DLPs, that dreaded acronym that no one wants to deal with, primarily because of things like false positives, the amount of time it takes to tune DLP to get it to actually work effectively and things like that. Anything you guys are doing to help make that process a little bit easier. And I know some of our attendees are asking and watching about this as well, because like I said, it's one of those acronyms that just falls into the, oh, please no more, I don't want to do this stage. But I think you guys have an interesting workaround for it.
Yeah. On the DLP front, as a product person, what I really geek out on here is that one of the things we recognize is that instead of just building a separate email product that doesn't do any DLP and a separate DLP product that doesn't do any inbound threat detection, when you combine the language engine across these, you are able to do much more effective things, because the same engine that understands communication patterns, behavior, language in the emails, and all of that is now powering a DLP product as well. And because of that, we're able to do some things in a really interesting manner. One is, of course, out of the box, we have policies that can do a lot of PII, PCI, PHI detection and prevention. So they don't have to write rules manually, the security teams, to protect against all of that. It just comes pre-built on the platform. On top of that, we have provided capability for security analysts to build custom identifiers, so medical record numbers, vendor identifiers, any confidential project names, things like that. They can write regexes for all of those. And because we have a natural language-based engine, we are now able to take the legacy world of custom identifiers and setting up severity levels for a number of times it occurs and things like that, and combine it with the magic of natural language understanding to analyze the context in the paragraphs, the context in the sentences, to reduce the false positives by an order of magnitude. So that's the big innovation that we have been able to do in combining that language engine that is custom built, bespoke, if you will, for each organization that we are going into, using that language context to reduce the false positives for that organization. And it saves a lot of time for the security teams.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough, especially when it comes to some of these solutions that, a lot of folks have maybe struggled with in the past. I can't stress enough that some of the struggles that I see really depend on a platform's ability to recognize the nuances of a certain organization and that kind of stuff. So super happy to see that. That was one of, that was another thing I liked about the platform as well, is the ability to actually tackle a solution like DLP correctly. Now, let's talk a little about the security side of things. When it comes to kind of Armorblox sitting as a security tool to assist the SOC to work, help through investigations. I know you walked through some examples a little bit earlier about how detection works on the back end, but how does it help the SOC deal with either remediation, with detection, with response prevention, so on and so forth? Like, how do I enable a security operations team with this?
Yeah. So there's a few parts of that. One is a lot of the remediation can be automatically configured on the platform. By Active Directory group, you can set up email alerts, you can do quarantines, deletes, permanent deletes, all of that. Second, it's an API-first platform, so all of the threads can be fed into a downstream SIM or SOAR for incident response and automated remediation from there. And third, any mails that get missed by Armorblox, which however much we try to protect against all attacks, if we do miss some, they can be put into an automated abuse mailbox remediation workflow, where when a user clicks on a button and reports a phishing email, we can automatically go analyze that, pull similar thousands of emails from all user mailboxes, automatically delete them, and automatically create a custom policy for the organization so that in the future, if a similar email were to come in, it's not Groundhog Day all over again. We have automatically protected you against that. So makes it very, very simple for SOC teams to actually look at threats and automate away 90 to 95% of the work that they do manually.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. So we've got just a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to let you take it over for the last. I think your last slide in here as well. So really quick, I'll give you, the last couple of minutes or so to talk kind of your final send off on the product. Why should we be looking at Armorblox? What different protections do you have? I know we've covered a lot of different details over, how to detect, what NLU looks like, how to augment SOC teams, DLP versus threat, so on and so forth. But I want to give you the last minute and a half or so to, 2 minutes actually, to take a look and tell us all, why Armorblox, what's next? Why should we consider going this route?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, a few important things. One is, if you've seen the Gartner market guide on email security, you see that Gartner projects about 40% of organizations by 2023 are going to go towards API-based solutions. So API-based solutions are seeing a dramatic increase in terms of adoption in the market. And some of the reasons are, one, it's easy to onboard. It's a one-click to deploy and connect. Second, it's easy to manage. So in this platform, it's very easy for you to set up custom rules, granular policy categories. There's another talk we can do on role-based access control and activity logging and monitoring who's looking at what. It's easy to respond once you set up actions. It's very easy and automated, so you don't have to take any manual actions there. And the mean time to remediation goes down a lot on Armorblox. And it's built as an API-first platform, so it's easy to integrate on the input side to different thread feeds that you might have, things like that. On the output side, to any downstream SIM and SOAR platforms, to build a fully automated workflow across different tools that you have in your environment. We have integrations into things like Cortex XSOAR, Azure Sentinel. We're working with Sentinel-1 to have a combination of an EDR plus email security joint detection and several other platforms. So it makes it very easy to leverage this platform and get value from it in addition to all the other tools that you have.
Awesome. Love it. Anand, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining me on here today and taking a chance to walk through The awesome platform y'all have built, amazing representation of technical capabilities. And like I've said before multiple times, really, really awesome job of bringing together technologies that I think before some folks have kind of maybe shied away from, DLP being one of them, but also implementing that natural language understanding to say, you know what, even though email threats are conversational, that does not mean adversaries should get away with them. So with that said, I think we are right at time. Thank you again so much for joining me today. It was great walking through this with you. Carol, I'm going to hand it back to you to take us home, but on behalf of everyone here and not to myself, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you. Carol, let's finish it up.
All right. Thank you so much, Anand and Matt, for your great presentation, and to Armorblox for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.